155 million years ago, Earth was not an easy place to survive, especially on land. This was the late Jurassic Period, a time when colossal dinosaurs ruled ecosystems across the globe. Everywhere on Earth, terrifying predators from the theropod group, along with giant herbivores from the sauropod group, roamed through various environments. But among the regions filled with these giants, none was more dangerous and extreme than the Morrison Formation, one of the most terrifying ecosystems ever to exist. The Morrison Formation could be considered the real-life version of Jurassic Park, a wild, desolate land with extreme weather conditions where super droughts turned it into a true battleground for survival. Here, you could encounter dozens of theropods, ranging from small to giant, stalking prey across the parched plains. Alongside them, over 30 species of massive sauropods roamed, many of which were larger than today's African elephants, the largest land animals on Earth. But the most incredible thing was not the presence of these titanic creatures. In a world of giants, a medium-sized dinosaur, neither a theropod nor a sauropod, emerged as one of the toughest and most successful creatures of the time. In fact, it was the only dinosaur ever recorded to have killed a fully grown Allosaurus, one of the most fearsome predators of the Jurassic Period. So, who was this mysterious dinosaur? Let's find out right now. Unless you've lived under a mountain your whole life, you've likely heard of the Stegosaurus, as it is among the top 10 most well-known dinosaurs, and rightfully so, with one of the most unique appearances in the dinosaur world. This unique appearance was even noticed by its discoverers 150 years ago when they found fossilized plates, vertebrae, and other post-cranial material in Colorado. However, while they knew something was up, they were totally off track. Originally, its founder, Othniel Charles Marsh, suspected that the Stegosaurus was a giant aquatic turtle-like creature whose plates acted as a biological roof, overlapping across its back. This is actually why it was named Stegosaurus, meaning roof lizard. Thankfully, not long after the initial discovery, better preserved specimens were unearthed. Still, these finds were made at a time when paleontology was not very developed, leading to even more inaccurate interpretations. One such theory even proposed that Stegosaurus was bipedal and had spikes growing out of its back instead of its tail. Meanwhile, other dinosaur bones were found around the holotype, such as those of Allosaurus and Dryptosaurus, which only added to the confusion, as they were mistakenly thought to be part of the Stegosaurus. Eventually, a major breakthrough occurred when a nearly perfect skeleton was found. This helped to clear up any confusion about how the bones were arranged, leading to the first accurate reconstructions, which looked much like the ones we see today. Over the decades, as we learned more about Stegosaurus, these reconstructions were fine-tuned to their current form. The consensus now is that the Stegosaurus was a quadrupedal herbivore with vertically pointed plates along its back and 4 spikes on its tail, making it undeniably a member of the Stegosaur family. Within this group, Stegosaurus is most closely related to the Ankylosaurus. The Stegosaurus belongs to the Stegosaur family, which includes about 10 different genera. All of these genera are more closely related to Stegosaurus than to the Chinese Pangasaurus. With 10 members, this family was fairly sizable and was further strengthened by additional discoveries. The Stegosaurus family included numerous species, 3 of which were distinct from each other. Unbeknownst to most, this icon wasn't just one dinosaur, but rather 3 different ones: Stegosaurus stenops, Stegosaurus ungulatus, and Stegosaurus sulcatus. Each of them shared many similarities, but they also had their differences. Stegosaurus stenops was distinguished by its shorter legs and wider plates, while Stegosaurus ungulatus was larger, had longer limbs, and more pointed plates. Finally, Stegosaurus sulcatus had highly unique tail spikes that were unusually large, with broad bases, giving it a distinct appearance. This has even led some to push for it to be considered its own genus. However, for now, it remains classified as a species of Stegosaurus. Despite these differences, there was one thing all three species had in common: size. While the Stegosaurus was not large for an herbivore, it was gigantic for a dinosaur in general, with estimates suggesting an adult size between 6.5 and 7.5 meters, 21 to 25 feet, making it the largest stegosaur we know of. Naturally, these numbers imply that it was also quite heavy, possibly tipping the scales at 5.3 tons, which would have made it the second largest land animal of its time. What's interesting, though, is that we know for certain that some exceptional individuals grew even bigger than this, thanks to a well-preserved specimen known as Apex. Best known for being the most expensive dinosaur of all time, having sold for $44 million in an auction, Apex is also the biggest known stegosaurus, measuring about 27 feet, 8 meters. Based on fragmentary remains, paleontologists further believe that, on rare occasions, a stegosaurus could have reached 30 feet, 9 meters, in length. This size alone most likely made fully grown adults untouchable to a few of the Morrison's predators, such as Phostera venator, and virtually every other predator in the area. However, due to the sheer abundance of carnivores and the fact that a few might have hunted in packs, there were still a good number of would-be predators, including Allosaurus, Saurophaganax, and Torvosaurus. It is for this reason that Stegosaurus evolved one of the most brutal weapons ever seen in the dinosaur world. The Thagomizer, don't be fooled by its funny-sounding name, refers to the 4 giant spikes found at the end of the Stegosaurus's tail. Each spike had an exceptionally sharp point and could grow to be 3 feet, nearly 1 meter in length, making them longer than the entire blade of a katana. In most species, these spikes were arranged vertically, as opposed to horizontally, making the upper vulnerable parts of theropods ideal targets. Once upon a time, some actually believed that the Stegosaurus didn't use its Thagomizer for defense, but rather for social display, with the main belief being that the tail was simply too rigid to allow any meaningful swinging motion. Yet, subsequent studies revealed that the tail lacked classified tendons, suggesting it was, in fact, very flexible during its life, allowing a swinging motion of about 180 degrees. Models and tests also showed that it could be swung with deadly speed, possibly up to 90 miles per hour, 144 kilometers per hour. At this rate, each spike would have struck its target with a force of 1,000 standard atmospheres, easily enough to punch clean holes through thick bones while causing catastrophic damage to internal organs and structures. Things got even more sinister, though, because since the spikes were narrow and long, they also created deep puncture wounds that were highly susceptible to nasty infections. This means that even if a theropod survived an encounter with a Stegosaurus and its Thagomizer, it could still die from the wounds. This is actually showcased by rare fossil evidence. This represents perhaps the most unfortunate dinosaur discovery ever. To be exact, a 147-million-year-old Allosaurus was found in Wyoming, with a peculiar injury to its crotch or pelvis. Talk about an unfortunate placement! The wound was deep and circular in shape, going straight through the bone. Based on these characteristics, paleontologists concluded that the Allosaurus sustained this injury after a failed hunting attempt on a Stegosaurus, as no other animal or dinosaur had a weapon that could have caused such an injury. Not to mention, a Stegosaurus spike fits perfectly into the wound. Researchers further deduced that the unlucky Allosaurus initially survived this encounter, but soon developed an infection that likely caused it to limp severely for a few weeks. eventually leading to its death. Sadly, for all other theropods, such fates may have been quite common. Analysis of recovered Stegosaurus specimens has shown nearly 10% of injuries to Stegosaurus spikes were consistent with high-speed collisions. In some cases, evidence even suggested that these giant spikes would occasionally get lodged in predators, similar to how porcupine quills do in modern times. For what it's worth, I should also mention that there are other theropod remains, besides the one pelvis, that reflect a Stegosaurus attack. This includes yet another Allosaurus specimen, whose vertebrae were absolutely skewered by a thagomizer. In this case, it's unknown if the victim died or was just maimed for life, as the wound never fully healed. Needless to say, Stegosaurus was one terrific dinosaur, whose design, the thagomizer wasn't even the full picture. Stegosaurus had another adaptation designed to fend off attackers, its gular armor. Even if you know and love the Stegosaurus, there's a chance you've never heard of gular armor, as the vast majority of Stegosaurus fossils don't show it. However, a few well-preserved specimens indicate that in life, it had a strip of armor situated under the neck, composed of pebble-like bony material. These bony pebbles numbered in the hundreds or even thousands, and together they provided a good degree of protection to its vital arteries. Furthermore, while fragile and thin, Stegosaurus also had plates on the top of its neck. These, combined with its gular armor, may have made biting the neck a very awkward task for certain theropods, forcing them to try to find other areas. This likely brought them within striking range of its tail. And speaking of neck plates, it's hard to talk about the Stegosaurus without discussing its back plates, as they were a huge part of its life. Ironically, in the beginning, many believed that it was these structures that deterred predators. However, in reality, they were far too delicate to provide any substantial defense, being made of very thin osteoderms that weren't even part of the skeleton, but instead grew out of the skin in a vertical fashion. These plates sometimes reached 0.6 meters, 2 feet, tall, while being just as wide. Although the true size is unknown, it is believed that while alive, the Stegosaurus had keratinous sheets that covered them, similar to how many animals today have coverings that enlarge their horns. Estimates suggest that these plates numbered between 17 and 22 in total, and they were likely used for social displays, while also helping to regulate the dinosaur's body temperature. The outer layer of the plates had extreme vascularization, meaning they contained large amounts of blood vessels. As blood traveled through these vessels, the plates would have been cooled by the air passing around them, a useful adaptation for living in the Morrison Formation, where it could be both hot and exceptionally dry. And in true Swiss Army knife fashion, there are other proposed uses for these plates too, including threatening displays. Certain paleontologists think that the blood vessels could have pumped blood into the plates, making them appear a deep, bright red. This could have caused predators to think twice before attempting to bite a thagomizer-wielding Stegosaurus. Now, with all this said, the Stegosaurus was certainly brave, but lacked brains, because while it had the power, the brains seemed to be missing. And I mean this in a literal sense. A Stegosaurus only had a brain about the size of a walnut, which, relative to its huge body, gives it one of the smallest brain-to-body ratios of any dinosaur. Its brain was roughly 57,000 times smaller than the rest of its body. Yes, while brain-to-body ratio isn't the perfect measure for gauging intelligence, many paleontologists have still interpreted the Stegosaurus's extremely small brain as a sign of limited intelligence. This belief may have actually played a role in the creation of one of the more common misconceptions about Stegosaurus, and that is that it had a second brain. The Stegosaurus was first described by Marsh, who discovered what he called a large canal in the hip region of the skeleton. He theorized that this canal could have fit an organ 20 times the size of the brain. To him, this organ was another brain that he believed was used to control the back part of the body and could help supercharge the Stegosaurus's decision-making skills during attacks. Although we now know, of course, that this theory is incorrect, and it turns out that this canal actually housed a structure that wasn't unique to Stegosaurus, a glycogen body. The exact function of this organ is still unknown, but scientists believe that it has something to do with regulating glycogen throughout the body. Surprise? Surprise? Now, to be fair to the Stegosaurus, while relying on a walnut-sized brain does hint that it wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, it should still be understood that you don't need much brain to carry out simple functions, like eating and knowing when to smash an attacker with your thagomizer. If the Stegosaurus did fail, it could still rely on one more advantage: numbers. Like many Jurassic herbivorous dinosaurs, Stegosaurus lived in herds at least sometimes. As discovered in trackways in Colorado, a group of 4 to 5 individuals were found traveling in the same direction, while another trackway showed a baby and presumably its parent walking together. This would have helped to dramatically increase protection, especially for the young, and was essential in the Morrison Formation, given the number of carnivores present. Yet, for large adults, it was a different story, as they likely needed little protection, spending a good chunk of their lives as solitary creatures, and demonstrating just how effective the Stegosaurus was at keeping predators at bay. On top of this, while not specifically a carnivore deterrent, the Stegosaurus had some pretty messed up teeth too, unlike anything seen in other ornithischians. Its teeth, numbering around 78, had strange indentations on the top that gave them the appearance of being a bit sharp. But don't worry, because the Stegosaurus was still undoubtedly a herbivore. It's just that we aren't really sure how these odd teeth functioned, but the best guess is that they were designed to snip plants in half and partially grind material with each bite. Based on its skull, these teeth operated in an up-and-down fashion. Given its habitat, paleontologists think that the plants included in its diet consisted of mosses, ferns, horsetails, cycads, and conifers, which were abundant during the late Jurassic. It was perhaps thanks to these plants. The Stegosaurus achieved a considerable range, showing up in 5 different states in North America. Not to mention, it went a bit international too, as remains belonging to the Ungulatus species were discovered in Portugal's Linas Formation. At first glance, it might seem strange that the Stegosaurus was found both in North America and Europe. However, it actually makes quite a bit of sense when you consider that, at the time, the 2 continents were much closer than they are today. The Storia group might have actually first started out in Europe before migrating over to North America at some point. Living in 2 distinct areas brought the Stegosaurus into contact with a whole host of dinosaurs, including a gobsmacking amount of sauropods and theropods, such as Allosaurus, Catosaurus, Sagax, Torvosaurus, Fosterorator, Orthoces, Elkov, Vanator, Haplocanthosaurus, Maraposaurus, Suasa, Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, Osoaurus, Dioicus, Ampelius, Luciotian, Oceanotitan, Barosaurus, and Supersaurus. And this is really just scratching the surface, because there were other dinosaurs present too, like various Ankylosaurus, Iguanodyiad, and Dr. Swords. And while dinosaurs alone made the Stegosaurus environments, especially the Morrison Formation, quite hectic and full, they were, of course, not the only creatures around. Non-dinosaurs included fish, amphibians, cruritarsans, cystoturtles, squamates, sphenodon, invertebrates, mammaliaforms, and parasaurs. With so much life, you must be thinking that the Morrison surely was a haven for animals, minus them eating each other and all that. And yet, while it could be very resource-abundant, the Morrison Formation was also, at times, the closest thing to hell on Earth, as it essentially experienced super droughts. Studies indicate that this environment had two distinct seasons, wet and dry. In the dry season, resources would rapidly dwindle, and bodies of water would shrivel up, putting catastrophic pressure on the ecosystem, inducing widespread thirst and starvation, and leading to an extremely high rate of cannibalization among theropods. The Stegosaurus may have been one of the toughest dinosaurs to ever roam the Earth, but its story is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to uncover about the incredible creatures of the late Jurassic and the mysterious world they lived in. If you're ready to dive deeper into this wild and fascinating era, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on what's coming next. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.